Welcome to Washington Watch with Congressman Walter Jones. Each month, we take a look at the events happening in Washington, D.C. and how they affect our lives here in eastern North Carolina. And now, here's your Congressman, Walter Jones.
Welcome to the May edition of Washington Watch. Today's guest is Congressman Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, the 3rd District. McGovern earned his Bachelor of Arts and Master's of Public Administration degree from the American University, working his way through college by serving as an aide in the office of United States Senator George McGovern. Jim McGovern was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1996 and is currently serving his 8th term. Representative McGovern has been among the most prominent congressional voices on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jim McGovern introduced a bipartisan bill calling for a flexible timetable for withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan as a matter of national security and fiscal responsibility. Representative McGovern serves as Senior Minority Whip, the second-ranking Democrat on the powerful House Rules Committee, also serves as member of the House Agriculture Committee, and co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. Jim McGovern and his wife Lisa have 2 children, Patrick and a daughter named Molly. I am pleased to have you on the show today, Jim McGovern. Thank you for joining us.
I'm honored to be here.
I have joined Jim McGovern in a bill called the Afghan Exit and Accountability Act, H.R. 1735. And I would like to read, I contacted a Marine general about 14 months ago who has been advising me on Afghanistan, and he has said for 14 months it's time to bring our troops out of Afghanistan. So I would like to read his comment. What do we say to the mother and father, the wife of the last Marine killed to support a corrupt government and a corrupt leader in a war that cannot be won? Jim, will you take time to explain to the people watching this show the bill that you've introduced, that I've co-sponsored, and what this bill will do?
Well, first of all, Walter, I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue. You have been a steadfast critic of these wars that we have no business being in, and you have brought a lot of credibility to this effort. But the bill that you and I have jointly introduced is pretty simple. It calls on the president to develop an exit strategy. Gives him 60 days to report to Congress what that exit strategy is and when we're going to bring our troops home. And then it also calls for a regular assessment of the cost of the war, not only in terms of how much we're paying for the military part of the war, and by the way, we're borrowing it. We borrow $8.2 billion a year. $8.2 billion a month, I'm sorry, for the war in Afghanistan alone, just for the military part. But to tell us how much we're borrowing, how much we're spending, what are the costs in terms of our veterans and health care, and what's the cost of the interest on the borrowed money? What are the other costs associated with the war, so that Congress and the American people can get a full appreciation that this war is costing us dearly. So, my hope is that this effort that we have launched together will provide the wind at the president's back to make the necessary announcement in July, which he promised, to do more than a token with drawdown of our troops, but a significant drawdown of our troops. And let's get this war ended.
Well, Jim, I want to commend you again and I want to thank you for asking me to join you in this effort. As you know, that the 3rd District of North Carolina, which I represent, it's a privilege to represent the 3rd District. We have Camp Lejeune Marine Base in the 3rd District, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and Cherry Point Marine Air Station. And I can honestly tell you, I'm hearing from more and more Marines and their wives and their family members of saying, what is the end point? What are we trying to achieve in Afghanistan? I'll ask you because I tell them I'm not sure. I don't know. What do you see?
Well, look, we all voted to authorize the president to use force in Afghanistan after September 11th to go back after Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Our own CIA tells us that al-Qaeda is no longer in Afghanistan, and in fact, we got Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, hundreds of miles away from the Afghan border, not living in a cave in Afghanistan, but living in a mansion in Pakistan. We need to go after al-Qaeda wherever they may be. But in Afghanistan, we're stuck in the middle of a civil war. Nobody can tell us what the end game is. And in fact, the mission has changed every year for the last 10 years. And the fact is that, a lot of really wonderful, men and women have lost their lives in this conflict. So many have been wounded. You and I have both been to Walter Reed Hospital. Right. I mean, there are young men and women who are going to need health care for the rest of their lives, total, round-the-clock care because of their injuries. And again, as you pointed out in that opening quotation, we're supporting a corrupt government in Afghanistan. The country's not used to a centralized government, and the government we're giving them is headed by this guy, Hamid Karzai, who fixed the elections, whose brother's a drug lord, who's stealing our money. I mean, this is we've seen this movie before, and it doesn't have a good ending. So, let's have the common sense to do the right thing and not sacrifice any more American lives, not continue to bankrupt our nation. Let's bring this war to an end, bring our troops home where they belong. Go after al-Qaeda wherever they may be, but you don't need 100,000 troops in another country to go after al-Qaeda.
The president proved that when he went after bin Laden.
Right, absolutely.
And Jim, on the point of Karzai and corruptness, I was so offended, and back in December this past year in the Washington Post, he was apparently meeting with General Petraeus and Ambassador Eikenberry, and apparently meaning Karzai was kind of heated.
Right.
And he said to those two men I just named, he said that I have three enemies, the Taliban, the Americans, and the international community. And he said, if I had to choose one today, it would be the Taliban. Yeah. Well, they're killing Americans.
Right. Over 1,500 Americans have already lost their lives. Countless numbers have been wounded. Taxpayer dollars have gone to support this man, and it's outrageous that he would say such a thing. And look, I think you and I can agree that national security also means the quality of life for people here in the United States.
Absolutely.
It means jobs. It means retirement security. It means health care. It means good education. And rather than nation building over in Afghanistan, we ought to do some more nation building here in this country. Our economy's in tough shape. We have a lot of people struggling. Rather than prop up a corrupt government in Afghanistan, let's support local governments here in the United States and help put our people back to work.
Jim, I agree. I know you and I were both on Judge Napolitano's show the other night on Fox, and he said the liberal from Massachusetts and the conservative from North Carolina. But we do find common ground here in Washington more times than people actually realize. But I'm with you 100% on that point of we spend $8.2 billion a month in Afghanistan, yet I've said this down in my district, Jim, I've said, but we're going to say to the senior citizen who goes to the center for a sandwich, and we're going to say to the child that needs a pint of milk in the morning, we can't help you with that milk or that sandwich because we don't have any money. Right. But yet we send it overseas to Karzai.
And, one of the things that frustrated me about this debate we had on reducing the deficit is that, the war costs never got brought up. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, if you want to go to war, you ought to pay for it. And
Absolutely.
If you don't want to pay for it, you ought not to go to war. And whether it's President Bush or President Obama, if you're not going to pay for this war, if you don't think that you can go to the American people and say, I want to tax you so to pay for this war, or cut something that you want in order to pay for this war, if you can't do that, then then you ought not to fight this war.
Well, Jim, you're right. Excuse me, because one way or the other, you're going to pay for it.
Right. Our kids are going to pay for it, and the interest on the debt. But it's just, I think what has happened is that since people aren't paying for it, there's no draft. That a lot of people go about their lives and they're thinking about other things, and they're not thinking about this war when they ought to be, because we have over 100,000 troops committed in Afghanistan. We're spending, borrowing $8.2 billion a month. It'll be over $100 billion this year we'll be spending on that war. Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, has said when you add in the cost in terms of the interest on the debt and the health care for veterans and all that kind of stuff, that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan will cost us, $4 to $6 trillion. Trillion. I mean, this is unbelievable. So you're right. Why are we going first to that senior citizen and trying to cut his or her benefits when there are billions, if not trillions, to be saved by ending these wars? And And again, if these wars were in our national security interest, you and I would be out there defending this
Absolutely.
policy. But our enemy is Al Qaeda. It's not Afghanistan. It's Al Qaeda. And let's go after those who have done us harm on September 11th. But you don't need to occupy countries like Afghanistan and Iraq in order to be able to get at them.
Jim, the point you made is exactly the first sentence I read that you made reference to, and you've heard it before, is from a Marine who served as a general. He's now retired. But he said to me 6 or 7 months ago, he said, the way you fight, same thing you just said, he said, the way you fight terrorism is you hit them where they live. You hit them with bombs, you hit them with drones, you hit them with killer squads. And that's what I think, again, I hope that Mr. Obama will reconsider his strategy for Afghanistan because of his success. And I commend him for getting bin Laden. But we have got to bring the troops home. Let me ask you, you know how hard I'm trying to work the Republican side. And let me say to those watching the show that when we introduced the bill, we had 7 Republicans on the bill. And are you getting any I know it's just been a week, but are you getting some interest from some of your colleagues on the Democratic side?
Yeah, we are. But I think there's on the Democratic side there are some people who don't want to go against the president and want to kind of keep a low profile. But what I'm trying to say to them, and I know you're trying to say the same thing to the Republicans, now's the time to let your views be known. The president over a year ago said that July 2011 was the time he was going to announce the drawdown of American forces. July is coming up pretty soon, and there are a lot of people here in Washington, the so-called establishment, that are content to see these wars go on and on and on and on forever. They never want to leave. They're rearing their heads again, and they're putting pressure on the White House. Those of us who believe these wars need to come to an end need to make sure that our president knows that we want this ended. Enough. We've been the longest war in our history. Enough. Bring our troops home. Stop bankrupting our nation. Stop supporting a corrupt government in Afghanistan. Let's invest in our people. Let's take some of that money and pay down our debt. But enough. Absolutely.
I can honestly say that I'm hopeful. Again, 7 doesn't sound like many Republicans, but I intend to work with a couple of my colleagues who are part of the 7 and do a Dear Colleague, and hopefully I'm going to start reaching out. Jim, every time I go home, I have a one-pager. At the top of the one-pager is a flag-draped coffin and Marines in full dress uniform carrying the coffin. Then I put the page with facts, some of them that you've used today. I have those facts. And then I will ask them to call Senator Burr and Senator Hagan, our 2 state senators, United States senators, and ask them, if you get a vote on the floor of the Senate to bring our troops home, please vote to bring them home.
I do the same thing with my constituents in Massachusetts, asking them to call Senator Brown and Senator Kerry. I think what you have shown, Walter, is that you have helped prove that there's a bipartisan consensus growing in this Congress to end this war. And what we need to do is keep that pressure up and hopefully persuade the president. I don't want a token drawdown. And I don't want, I know, and it's easy, some of his advisors say, kick the can down the road a couple of years, get the election over with, and we'll deal with it then. It's just not fair to our men and women in uniform. And, Lyndon Johnson was right. It's easy to get into war. It's hard as hell to get out of one. But, as hard as it is, it's the right thing to do. And, and it's not worth sacrificing any more American lives and any more of our tax dollars.
Jim, I believe that and I want to thank you again for taking the lead on this legislation and allowing me to be the chief co-sponsor. I believe that we have a chance to reach the American people because they understand that we cannot afford the manpower, which is the most important, these young men and women who have lost their lives and been wounded, and then the investment of foreign money that we borrowed to pay for it. So my hope is that you and I will keep working this, and I'm with you. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, but I'm with you on this, that I want the president to understand that he's got support from across this nation to start bringing them home, because my concern, your concern, is that in July, that if it's not more than 10,000, 15,000 troops coming home, it's not going to be much of a reduction.
I agree, and we're going to keep the pressure up on our colleagues. It doesn't take a lot of courage to stand on the House floor and say, stay the course, because none of us are on the front lines there.
That's right.
I just came from a funeral on Saturday of a constituent of mine who was killed over there, and left some young children behind, and a wonderful wife and mother and father, and that guy had so much to contribute to our country, and he was killed. So we need to remind people that sometimes it takes more courage to stand up and say, let's change our policy. And in this case, thanks to you, we have a bipartisan group growing here in which we're going to continue to pressure the president. And hopefully in July he will announce a significant drawdown and signal the end of this long war.
Well, my hope is the same as yours, because I think the president should take great pride in bringing bin Laden down, and was the leader of Al Qaeda. Now he's been deposed of. I think the president could say, that's victory. That's what we were trying to do. But again, my concern is your concern, the advisors around him. But we just keep doing what we can do. And I guess the only other point I wanted to make, I think we got a minute or so, that the cost of taking care of the wounded, as you said earlier, Joe Stiglitz said it'd be anywhere from $4 to $6 trillion, money we don't have. We're not allocating that money now for down the road.
Right. Well, as you know, the men and women who are serving in our armed forces are incredible. I'm always in awe when I visit them. I visit them both in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're incredible people. They're just the American people should be proud of the men and women who serve in our armed forces. And they're in this war because politicians put them there.
That's right.
And politicians need to end this war. And that means those of us in Congress, Republican and Democrat, and the President need to stand together and demand an end to this war.
Well, I think your point is well made. I just found out we got about 3 minutes left,
good.
So it gives us a little more time. And I believe sincerely that the people of this country, Jim, I'm actually meeting tomorrow with Matthew Howe and Tony Schaefer and Tom Reynolds. Tom Andrews, excuse me. I know Tom Reynolds used to be here, Tom Andrews. And we're going to try to look at the side of finding that one spokesman that will, when he or she, and it can be a she as well as a he, when they lend their name to this effort, to your bill, that they can get national attention and start speaking about this issue to help those of us in Congress build the numbers.
Well, we need, we had, remember Jack Murtha came out against the war in Iraq. That was national attention, national news, and there were a number of people who fit that category. But we need the American people to start calling their representatives and their senators and writing letters to the White House. There needs to be some more public pressure. I think every poll I've seen shows that the American people overwhelmingly want this war to come to an end. But there are people, in the so-called establishment down here that, want it to continue. When you think about it, we don't ever leave anywhere we go. We still have 30,000 troops in Korea. We have troops in Japan. We have troops in Europe. We have 50,000 troops still in Iraq. We can't sustain this. No. And we need to do what's in our national security interest. But going broke is not in our national security interest. And I think Al Qaeda would like nothing better than for us to continue to be dragged down in this endless war in Afghanistan that has no end, that we can't even define what success means. I think let's end this. Let's regroup. Let's rethink our strategy on how do we fight this war on terror. End these wars. Reinvest in our own people, pay down the debt. Let's get our country back on the right track, and we have an opportunity to do that if the president will end this war, and if he can make that announcement in July that this war is coming to an end. I think that it makes me more hopeful for the future.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for being on the show. You've made so many great points today. I know that the people in the 3rd District watching this show will thank you for your position, your leadership, especially as trying to bring our troops home from Afghanistan, because that's the way the majority of the people feel. And it's been a privilege to work with you, to continue to work with you, God willing, and do what's right for this country. And thank you for your service to the people of Massachusetts.
Well, you're one of my heroes, and I hope that by my saying that I don't hurt you politically. but I admire your guts on this issue and your courage, because it takes a lot of courage for you to have taken the stand you have, not only on this war in Afghanistan but Iraq. And I'm proud you're my friend.
Jim, thank you so much. The feeling is mutual.
Thanks
I appreciate
for having
it.
me.
In about 30 seconds, I'm going to have a staffer want to talk about some of the issues that you've been calling our office about in addition to Afghanistan. Welcome back to the second edition of the May Washington Watch. I'm delighted to have Catherine Fota is on the show now. Catherine does helps me with my speeches as well as she does the press for our office, and I'm delighted to have you on, Catherine, and knowing that you're from Greenville, North Carolina, graduate of East Carolina University.
I am. It's a pleasure to be here, sir. Thank you so much for having me. I've got some big shoes to fill with Glenn, but I'll try to do the best I can today.
Well, you might just share with the those watching the show, we only got a few minutes, all the calls you got when I came out and said that it was time to bring our troops home, and you were a very busy lady for a couple of days for sure.
I was, absolutely. It was a busy time, but I think the feeling of the people of the 3rd District is changing. I think people are starting to see that this war is costing us so much, and I think your position and your leadership on that, we've gotten a lot of calls about, your position, you and Mr. McGovern's bill, and people are starting to agree with that, and I think it's very important for the people of the 3rd District to know everything that you are doing.
Well, Catherine, as you well know, this is a very, very important issue. There's no question about it, but you have a responsibility of many times that Josh Bolin and I had an amendment dealing with the cat shares issue, which is a fishing issue for those that don't fish. And that got a lot of interest from up and down the coast, and I gave Josh credit for getting that amendment passed, signed by the President in the continuing resolution, but you had many calls on that from our district as well as other parts.
We did. You're a pretty big hero up in New England, of all places.
I don't speak the language very well.
Your effort on that and that amendment for cat shares to help out our fishermen, we've gotten a lot of great calls on that, a lot of good press for that as well. There's one thing we have been getting calls about, Congressman, and that's the debt ceiling. Now, we avoided a government shutdown, thank God.
Right.
But with this debt ceiling, now they're saying we've got until August. What are your thoughts? I believe you're the only member of Congress to vote against the debt ceiling the past 6 times it's been up.
Well, Catherine, I want for this country that Mr. Boehner and Senator Reid and Congressman Boehner, Speaker Boehner, and the President, Mr. Obama, will get together and figure out that if it's necessary to raise the debt ceiling, then what can we do to show the American people that we're going to start controlling spending and reduce spending? I don't think you can ask the Congress to raise the debt ceiling unless you can give the American people something that they can hold on and believe in.
Right.
And if we can't do that, I think it's going to be hard for the House to pass an increase in the debt ceiling. And I've told people all the time that I want to hear from the people back in my district. I want to believe that we can do the right thing, not just for today, but to tomorrow's generation.
Absolutely, and I think that kind of ties into the war as well with the borrowing that we're doing, the spending we're doing, $8.2 billion in Afghanistan per month. That's $2 billion a week. And I know you're famous for the quote of, we're fixing car-sized streets, but there are still potholes in Greenville. I know that. Right. So I think that's something we need to get a grip on as well. So the National Defense Authorization Act is coming up.
Yep.
And I know there are several provisions in that you have special interest in. Why don't you tell us about those?
Well, we do have several. Of course, again, I am probably that's an issue very dear to my heart, and that's to rename the Department of Navy to be known as Department of Navy and Marine Corps. And every chairman since I put this bill in about 10 years ago has put it into the Armed Services bill that we'll be marking up. And I'm pleased that it'll be there, and I hope that maybe this year that the Senate will agree to the House position and recognize and honor the Marine Corps. They have certainly earned it through their history of dying for this country, as well as giving their life and limbs, and those, thank God, that did come back.
Absolutely, and I think last year we had a record-setting number of co-sponsors, 423, I believe.
Well, this year I've gotten permission to only get about 300, so we're over halfway there. So
right.
We'll make it. But and there are other issues that we're doing. We're having a very slight increase for our military pay raise, which I wish it could be more. But in the setting we're in, it's very, very difficult. And I think this bill, we do quite a bit. I have a couple of amendments that have already been accepted that deal with PTSD and TBI. And I'm very concerned, as Jim said in the early part of the show, about our wounded coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq as well.
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough to go over to Walter Reed 2 weeks ago and to tour Dover Air Force Base. And I don't think people fully realize, like you do, as many times as you've gone, and you go almost monthly, I think, to Walter Reed at least, to see the true cost of this war. And it is our young men and women in uniform. Speaking of that, real quickly, I know we only have a few seconds. Brooks Gruber and the V-22 issue. This is an issue and a concern of yours for the past decade. Please tell us about that.
Well, Catherine, we're making progress. A lot of people who are experts with the V-22 Osprey. This is a crash that happened in the year 2000, and John Brow was the pilot, and Brooks Gruber was the co-pilot, and they were killed along with 17 other Marines. And all we want the Department of Navy to do is to issue a letter to the wives, Connie Gruber down in the district, Trish Brow over in Maryland, and just say your husbands were innocent of any wrongdoing in the crash of the plane. Catherine, I guess at times about up. Thank you for watching this show, and please, God, continue to bless our men and women in uniform, and please, God, continue to bless America.
Thank you for taking the time to join us for Washington Watch.